September 22, 1862, Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation in Antietam, Maryland. In addition, President Lincoln gave a speech on November 19, 1863, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, called the Gettysburg Address. In these speeches, he ordered the freedom of slaves in all states. Although this proclamation did not immediately free slaves, it was still an official and significant beginning to the process of emancipation. Despite his positive intentions, his triumph in freeing slaves was the greatest cause of his assassination and resulted in the tragedy of the whole nation. Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky. He grew up on the western frontier. In the Black Hawk War of 1832, he served as a militia captain defending Illinois. During his service, he developed a reputation for pragmatism and integrity. Later, he served 8 years in Illinois legislative and 2 years in Congress as a Whig Party leader. Self-educated, he became a lawyer in Illinois at 1836. In the debate with Democratic leader Stephen A. Douglas, he gained the nation's attention and became the candidate from Western country. On November 6, 1860, he was elected for presidentship. Lincoln's election eventually became one of the primary reasons of the outbreak of the Civil War. He also became the first president to institute a military draft. He promoted General Ulysses S. Grant to General-in-Chief as the Union Army faced early defeat in the war. The Gettysburg Address was a speech that was adored and angered a lot of Americans. Abraham Lincoln had an idea of freeing slaves in America. He declared that all colored men would be freed and equal as any white man. In the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln said,
407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Slaves were delighted of this future freedom and supported Lincoln, but this angered about 45% of white men. Slave owners were not. Abraham Lincoln also stated in the speech,
"We are dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall, under God, have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from."
This shows Lincoln emphasized the redeemed by a new birth of freedom, for which Booth disagreed. He thought the bloodshed of the war might be redeemed if the man he blamed for the violence and loss of life was killed. President Abraham Lincoln expressed the fundamental Emancipation Proclamation on September 22, 1862. It arranges that if the Southern states did not stop the deterrent, then by the beginning of January 1863, the proclamation would be concluded. Precisely when the Confederacy did not yield, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1, 1863, as the nation was near the third year of the typical war. The President announced that all people held as slaves inside the definite states are, and henceforward will be free. Being mindful to regard the breaking points of his power, the Emancipation Proclamation just connects to the states in disobedience. The Emancipation Proclamation played a very important role in changing the outcome of the Civil War, because it weakened the Confederacy by freeing the men and women providing coerced labor to support the Confederate war effort, and allowing extra men to go to war. Since they would leave their farm in the hands of their slaves, and by putting almost 250,000 black men in Union uniforms, which gave the Union an extra boost in manpower, and give Americans a claim to citizenship that would not be revoked. They were willing to die for their country. The war may have ended differently if Lincoln had not issued a proclamation, and without Union victory, Lincoln may not have been assassinated. It was not a popular measure, so it's fair to say it probably made people dislike Lincoln.
The President has been shot.
Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head by a Confederate sympathizer, John Wilkes Booth, while attending the play Our American Cousin at Ford Theater in Washington, D.C. on April 14, 1865. Lincoln died the following day at 7:22 a.m. He was the first American president to be assassinated, and his death was a test both for the country and the strength of its constitutional plan of succession. John Wilkes Booth was killed when Union soldiers tracked him down to a Virginia farm 12 days after he assassinated President Abraham Lincoln. The execution of Lewis Powell, David Hurd, George Atherod, and Mary Sturrott, who were also convicted of taking part in the conspiracy, on July 7, 1865, at Fort McNair in Washington City. The greatest cause of Lincoln's assassination was abolitionism, the idea of freeing slaves, to which he gave the speech Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address. Lincoln's assassination deteriorated his relationship with the Congress. Lincoln would have been able to control the radical Republican due to his conventional leadership ability and wisdom. But his death left a void in the leadership and his successor. Andrew Johnson was a Southerner, which angered even more Republican. They hated him before he became the President of the United States. Although Johnson came up with a similar plan to Lincoln, the Congress was not pleased. Abraham Lincoln's idea of equal freedom inspired the Civil Rights Movement, which is clearly shown in the famous civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr.'s speeches. For example, MLK gave his famous I Have Dreams speech on the step of Lincoln's memorial and mentioned Lincoln frequently by using similar words or phrases. Also, he used Lincoln as a historical scope during the speech. MLK's respect towards Lincoln was obviously shown in his speeches and literature. Even though they lived a century apart, and they have their own ways of spreading out thoughts and ideas, but they have the same goal of making the place they live to become a more perfect country with the right of freedom for everyone. The Secret Service is a federal law enforcement agency recognized for fighting crimes and protecting the president. Its legislation was signed by Abraham Lincoln on the day of his death, being one of his last official acts. Through the agency that had been charged to protect the president, it was first assigned to investigate and stop counterfeit money. However, after the assassination of William McKinley, the Secret Service was ordered to carry out its current job. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation also had a great impact on the ending of the slavery, even though the proclamation only freed the slaves in the rebellion states. By the end of the Civil War, the proclamation influenced both North and South to accept the abolition for all slaves. This also led to the establishment of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery in the United States. Abraham Lincoln, now known as one of the greatest presidents of the United States, had contributed a lot to abolishment of slavery.
Lincoln, it's very, very clear. He did not like slavery. And there's a lot of evidence. If you look at the Lincoln-Douglas debates back in 1859, he clearly said that our fathers did not make this nation half slave and half free. And he also, he made an annual address to the Congress in 1862, in December of 1862. And there he said that, if we give freedom to the slaves, we assure freedom for the rest of us. And so he's really clear that if we have freedom for all people in this country, that what will happen is all people will have opportunities. He believed that holding slaves would destroy the principle of free labor. In free labor, a person is free to sell their labor for whatever price and to whomever they want.
Lincoln's more lenient proposal might have produced a different outcome, though we will never know. Later days, Lincoln was portrayed to a worshiping public as a self-made man, the liberator of the slaves, and the savior of the Union who had given his life so that others could be free.